So great. Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining the second session for the XR Innovation Week. Super excited to have each and every one of you on board. I'm happy to have Judith. Right, Judith is somebody I look up to in the XR space in Africa, and she basically introduced me into XR when they opened up a VR lab in Abuja, and since then the journey has been amazing. Thank you so much, Judith, for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Arome. It is such a pleasure to be here with you to see how far you've come, to see the amazing thing you're doing with this XR Innovation Week, and of course, to talk a little bit about the technology and what I see as Africa's future linked to that. So,
Awesome.
good afternoon, everybody, wherever in the world you are. And I'll get started if that's all right.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Catch you soon.
all right then. Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I thought I'd talk a little bit about the extended reality technologies and Africa's future because that's something I've been asked about a lot recently. What is the future of AR and VR, and particularly from an African context? To tell you a little bit about who I am, my name is Judith Okonkwo. I run an ecosystem developer called Emisi 3D. And I describe us as an ecosystem developer because all we are focused on is trying to grow the extended reality technologies on the continent. We're primarily based out of Lagos, Nigeria, but we do work wherever and whenever we can across the continent with a whole host of amazing partners and collaborators. I love this particular slide, which is one that I used to use in my very early presentations, because it really highlights our journey. We started out small and now we're here. And we can talk about where exactly here is. But I want to take you back to just how small we started out back in the day. And here we are. This is about 5 years ago, where this started the journey to really kind of like explore these technologies and give more access to the technologies on the continents. Began with, one VR ready laptop that was ordered off Amazon, uh, a Samsung Gear VR headset you'll recognize from back in the day, a couple of 360 cameras, the books that you see over there, and what you're not seeing at the beyond the books was a huge bowl of Kit Kat that we used to keep on the table, so that if people weren't going to come for the tech, they'd at least come for the chocolate, and from there the conversations would start. Um, this space we were in is CC Hub, the co-creation hub, which, if you are familiar with the Lagos tech ecosystem at all, you will know is in Yaba, which is at the heart of that ecosystem and is one of the leading spaces for innovators to just come together and collaborate. And now they've extended, across the continent to Kenya and Rwanda as well. So this was the start. It was very, very small, but it was also, I think, very, very necessary. So if you recall, 2016 was a year where maybe the hype cycle was, getting to a summit, and people were saying, will this be the year of virtual reality? I think that was a question that was asked frequently then. One thing for sure, it was certainly a time where there was this reawakening, I suppose, when it comes to these technologies. We were coming off the bat of the acquisition of Oculus a couple of years before that, the availability of cardboard as well, which presented this opportunity for more people to at least start thinking of immersion, even if not really experiencing its full capabilities. So really exciting times. Okay, so I want to go on and talk a little bit about our now, as it has been sort of like over the last year and some. And from a Nigerian perspective, I mean, I know there have been all sorts of issues all around the world that have really kind of like gripped I suppose, all of our minds and our consciousness. And in Nigeria, one that was particularly top of mind last year were the protests against police brutality, and those were known as the NSAS protests. But this is, against the backdrop of global Black Lives Matter protests and so many others that happened, and also so many other situations that were just, I think, really highlighting all of the issues and challenges that still exist in our world today. And of course, all of this was occurring against the backdrop of COVID-19, a pandemic like nothing we had ever seen before. That really has completely changed the way we do things. And now, just for context, typically the numbers for out-of-school children in the world, which are staggering, in normal times, is roughly about 260 million. I believe a 2018 count from the UN put it at about 258. But look at the pandemic, along with a whole host of other things like, of course, people having to work from home, disruption to, the aviation sector. There's, of course, this tremendous impact on the lives of children and on their education. And for me, particularly, that number is staggering, right? 1.6 billion children out of school. And what it means to then be able to navigate around that. And I've got sort of like two excerpts here that I just wanted to highlight because I think they give a bit of context for the conversation. So one is from Microsoft's chief executive, and he noted, and this was in the summer of 2020, last year, that the corporation had seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. So I suppose highlighting how the pandemic has really accelerated, virtual interaction in whatever format that it might take. The second is this one from Nature, and this is from January this year. And it's really just highlighting what the pandemic has really made, the norm when it comes to students and educators, with online learning becoming the way that education, where it's available, is now the standard expected manner of delivery. And I think, as well as highlighting the opportunities with going online, it also highlights the challenges for those who are not able to go online. And of course, hence that 1.6 billion number and the kind of like subsequent effects. I now want to situate all of that in the context of Africa, the continent. Now, if you hear a lot about the youth population in Africa, much is made about, how young it is. It's the youngest continent. And there are all sorts of projections about that median age. But for me, I think the most telling thing is that when I look at these numbers, I see the workforce of the future. In most other continents, we have populations that are aging. But in Africa, we still have really high population growth, and alongside that, a teeming youth population that I think we should start to think a bit more critically about. Now, I'd like you to think about these numbers, right? So these numbers across the continent of young people, and then think about it in context of some of the things that we've looked at earlier, like the protests in Nigeria. And then here I highlight just some of the wins that happened despite all of that. So these really, really incredible numbers and projections for population growth, and then the context of the pandemic and what it is making impossible, but then on the flip side, what it has also enabled. And then particularly for Nigeria, against the backdrop of the challenges that young people in particular might face. And here we see some of the big wins that have happened just in the last 6 months. So for me, it was very, very exciting to just see like all of this activity in action in the tech space. So one was the very significant acquisition. I mean, it's not immersive tech, but I think because we're such a close-knit community, you then feel the ripple effects of all of this activity. So the acquisition of Paystack in Nigeria by Stripe for 200 million. Just a couple of weeks ago, another fintech company, became a unicorn and is now valued at over $1 billion. And then bringing it home to immersive technology and our field, you probably saw with Microsoft's reveal for Microsoft Mesh. And here is a tweet from the lead for that Microsoft Mesh team that is based in Nigeria, the Microsoft Mixed Reality Engineering team in Lagos, Nigeria, who contributed to that product. And I think we were all certainly in the ecosystem incredibly proud to have Nigeria have a footprint in terms of kind of like global XR platform delivery for the world. So that's the backdrop of on the continent, kind of like tech activity. I'm now bringing it back to just a little look at, thoughts around extended reality. And you'll notice that this slide is from 2019. So these were projections. And it'll be really interesting to go back and see just where we are at the end of this pandemic. Because as I, highlighted from that quote from Satya Nadella, within 2 months, some companies have seen transformation that they wouldn't have expected in 2 years. But here, look at the numbers, look at the indicators for growth in industry spending and growth in consumer spending in these spaces. And one thing that I would say is that certainly from early indicators, this has definitely increased significantly for industry spending because of that pandemic. Okay, so I think given all of this, one thing that I always like to, I suppose, contemplate is what is an extended reality global agenda? What does it mean if we start to think about bringing the whole world together when we look at things with an XR lens? For me, I think this is a question that we have to contemplate, particularly because if you look at things from an African context, I think you'll see a lot of challenges. And that's why, for me, a global agenda must include these elements that I've included here. In 2016, for example, one of the indicators that people would highlight when they talked about whether or not that was the year of virtual reality was the amount that had been invested in the space, and it was in the billions and billions of dollars. But what I often tell people is you have to remember that in all of those billions that were being counted back then, not $1 came to the African continent, and that is, I think, something that really needs to be discussed if we're going to think about these technologies being developed in a way that are truly inclusive. The next is access. And so here with access, I think about the journey that we're on to make sure as many people as possible get their first touch and feel of these technologies and have access to the technologies to create as they will. And how difficult that is for a number of reasons. I mean, one is, the obvious one, that you can't even get the hardware locally in most sub-Saharan African countries. And that when you do access it, via other platforms, shipping it in, you will pay sometimes up to twice the cost that somebody else would pay in other parts of the world. So kind of like real challenges around like access, specifically when it comes to virtual reality hardware, but also other elements of equipment that would support the technology and involvement with it. I've got inclusive XR strategies here. I think that, there has been some talk about, inclusion and what that might look like. I think the conversation has begun, but I think it definitely needs to go a lot further. And this is probably one of the reasons that, apart from the obvious like fantasticness of it all, I'm so excited about what happened with Microsoft Mesh, because if for nothing else, it has opened the world up a little bit to some of the XR talent that is on the continent and given them a platform that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I do have to say that we have seen it in other ways and in other spheres of immersive tech, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. We also talk partnerships here. I think that they're very important. I think the beauty of collaboration is evident in this fantastic event, with Arome partnering with, XR leaders from across the world. And I think that that's the sort of thing that we need to see happen more and more often, just to kind of like start to level the playing field for everyone. So this is a throwback. This particular continent map of AR/VR was one that I started to put together probably at the end of 2017, early 2018. And I was just playing around and saying, who's doing what on the continent. And of course, this is not in no way, shape, or form the totality of what's going on when it comes to XR, not even then, at the beginning of 2018. But it was an indicator of what was happening. And if you're playing in the field, you'll probably recognize, quite a few names there, like Black Rhino VR out in Kenya, or Electric South in South Africa, who do really incredible work. As well as people like 5D VR in Egypt. And for me, I think when we come to kind of like looking at ourselves and mapping the stories, this is a really critical element. Who's out there? Who's doing what? How do we come together? And how do we start to determine what our, extended reality future will be on the continent? Now, at the time I was putting that map together in early 2018, I was also having a look at some of the numbers around the impact of these technologies. And this is one from a little bit later on in that year where, it was just some, I think, really stunning numbers for people who were wondering why people were bothering with these technologies on the continent. And here you see numbers that I'm sure if you're involved in XR, you'd have seen several times over, but 40% fewer mistakes than conventionally trained surgeons. And this is with using mixed reality for training in the medical space, and 80% savings in training time, a 40% reduction in training time as well. And now this is from 2018, but even when it comes to training for the pandemic, we've seen really exciting work happen in that space around the world, from the use of, Oculus Gos to train frontline medical staff on the use of PPE in the NHS in the UK, right through to Black Rhino VR in Kenya, training midwives and rural nurses using the Oculus Go as well. So really a lot happening that has really started to change the way we work and learn due to these technologies. So that's 2018. Now I moved to 2019. And I think something that really changed the game, and I've touched on it quite a bit here, which is the Microsoft mixed reality team getting set up on the African continent. Now, this is not the entire team. I just mean that they have mixed reality engineers on the continent. And this is 2019 when they announced the opening of that African Development Center and got started with the work. And I use that as a little bit of a catalyst as I start to look again at what the landscape looks like currently. So here we've got, once again, I stress, not the totality of what's going on the continent, but an indicator of just some of the change that has happened. So a few more startups and organizations who are in the extended reality space in some way that I'm really excited about. But something else that gives me particular joy on this map is to see tertiary institutions of education joining the group. And I believe that, the more we can infuse XR into academia, I think the better the outcome will be in terms of the different elements that we need to grow this ecosystem, particularly when it comes to nurturing talent and R&D. Okay, so the question was about XR and Africa's future. I think that question necessarily at least for me, means that we need to think about what Africa's XR strategy is. And let's say we were just looking at, over the next 5 years, what might we be focused on? So here I have some of the indicators that I think are particularly critical if we are to really develop the ecosystem the way I envision it. So there's talent. And here, definitely, I think a renewed focus on developing the talent for XR and allied technologies. I know that certainly, when you speak with other people in the space, there is always this gap, whatever projects you're doing, you always wish like, oh, you had this X other person or Y other person with this particular skill set or this knowledge. Because really there are too few of us. So whatever we can do to nurture this, I think is really critical. Policy, I think, is also another really important area that needs to be focused on now. And I have to really, really celebrate all of the people who've done tremendous work at the grassroots and at the community level, really just getting things started from the ground up. But now there needs to be the focus as well from the top. We need to have an enabling environment that will support and incentivize XR on the continent. Industry, of course, as always, is important, not only for the demand that they will create, but also for the ways in which they can support and help to develop the ecosystem and be supported by it in terms of furthering their own goals and objectives. Education, I'm sure it goes without saying, is extremely critical. And, it's kind of like a double opportunity here, because of course there's education to develop the talent that we need, but also the infusion of XR in education, I think could potentially change the game for the continent, particularly when we start to think of those youth numbers that we highlighted in the beginning again. And then I think the final element that we must consider, a pillar, if you will, for an African XR strategy is research and development. How do we start to drive XR R&D? I mean, here I put from the tertiary level, but if it can start even earlier, even better. And this, you see how critical this is when you think about some of the challenges I mentioned, like the access to hardware. So first of all, the access is an issue, but then when you do get it, you ask yourself the question, how suitable is it for the local environment that I want to take it into? And then how much better would it be if we were creating something locally, especially suited for, the constrained environments where you might not have power from the grid, where, the average temperature is, this high. So yeah, it's very excited to see R&D be focused on as part of this strategy as well. So I wanted to quickly kind of like throw this in there because I've talked about a strategy. I talked about kind of like collaboration and working on the continent. And one of the ways that we all are kind of like approaching this, and there's several of us on the continent working together to make this happen, is that there's currently an Africa XR survey, industry survey that's live. It's the first time on the continent that we're all coming together to say, who are we? What are we doing? What do we think we need to get where we want to go? Where do we envision the continent will be in 10 years or in 15 years? So if you're in any way involved with XR on the African continent, please go to africaxrreport.com and fill out the survey. Okay, so back to the initial question about XR and Africa's future. Now, I'll take you back again to the beginning of this work for me 5 years ago. And I would always ask people at the end, I would say, the future is ours to create. And at that time, I would say, what will you do? Because I was challenging them to, in whatever form they could, but take up the mantle and really advance our technology-enabled future on this continent, especially when it came to the exponential technologies, and particularly when it came to immersive technology. I've changed it now to the future is ours to create. What will we do? Because I think at this stage, this conversation is at, it is not a question of you on your own doing. I think the question is, what will we do together? How can I help you? How can you help me? Let's have that conversation and collaborate to really advance XR for the whole world. And then the answer. I believe the answer is still an unknown. I think that today we have the opportunity to determine what Africa's future will be. And more importantly, how we in the XR ecosystem will enable it. Thank you.
Amazing. Amazing. That was great. Amazing. You did great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Wow,
you.
I wish you couldn't
Thank
like
you,
you
thank you,
couldn't
Judith.
stop.
I think I've got a bit of a lag. Okay.
What you judge from your presentation is the journey.
Sorry, say that again. Arome, did you ask me something?
I think whilst Arome reconnects you, I just wanted to say thank you so much for that.
Oh,
Yeah, no, we've been watching your work honestly, and some of the things you're doing, and you and the team are doing absolutely fantastic. And one thing I was really interested to find out is a little bit more about the 2020 AR VR Africa Hackathon, which, if I remember correctly, there were 64 teams,
yes,
28 African countries.
yes.
27 teams winning cash prizes. How was it? We know Facebook were involved as well. Please, can you just tell us
Yes.
a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I mean, the first thing I have to do when it comes to that hackathon is really celebrate and thank all my partners around the continent who worked with me, because they have to be the craziest people. And I say that because when I first planned the hackathon, it was just going to be 48 hours in May. And, I remember I sent them an email in January. I'm like, we're ready to go. It'll be this weekend in May, 48 hours. Here's the deal. And then the pandemic happened. And you know what? 48 hours turned into 5 months. It was supposed to happen in countries only. We said, well, it's virtual. Let's open it up to the whole continent. Yeah, so it was tremendous. I mean, I think I was particularly excited to be able to operate in countries where we had not had reach for. And it was also really rewarding because whenever we'd done a hackathon, we would always get applications from, I remember the very first one in 2016, which was just in Lagos. We had people from Botswana applying, and so it's really fantastic to be able to create as much access as possible for more people. We also had really incredible people like donate time to run master classes and all sorts of sessions and mentorship. So yeah, it happened. We wrapped it up in December, but I'm super excited because we just started a boot camp for the top teams from each of the country groups. So we're working with 10 teams, and over the next 2 months, they'll be getting supports to really think through their solutions, to think through ongoing, support and development required for it. And on the 28th of May, we'll be having a demo day. So I'll be inviting all of you. I hope you'll come just to see how
Sure.
Yes, please make sure. We would love to be a part of that. And Judith, are there any plans for a hackathon this year?
Of course, there are always plans for a hackathon. I mean, people ask, and I'm always like, when are we not thinking of one? So yes, definitely. But as always, we're looking for support. So if we get the support, it happens. But yeah, we're very, very keen to do both a hackathon, and we're also very interested, which we've been for a couple of years, doing a specific kind of like women's events, because we have quite a few women doing really exciting things with immersive technology as well.
Brilliant.
Great.
Fantastic. Judith, thank you for sharing everything.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
You're such an inspiration. And, I'm going to take you up on your offer with regards to, us talking about what our asks are of each other and how we could support each other. Because I think that's really, really powerful. And so I'll get with you offline. I think others will want to as well. I mean, how can we support, let's do a part.
Yes, and I think this is such a beautiful example of this. So, kudos to you all. Arome, well done. I could not be prouder. I mean, this is so amazing.
Thank you so much, Judith. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Also, thank you for sharing, and we'll catch up with you very, very soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. Thank you all.
Thanks, Judith.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you all for joining us.